I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. Tonight we're going to talk about perception. You know, the way you think about something or the way you see something. It really heavily influences our decision making. Where you spend our time, where we spend our money, all that kind of stuff. And it's no secret that the perception of downtown Portland, not great. In fact, it might be the worst it's been since 2020. Because of that, it's our big story tonight. When you think about a mall, its success is often measured in the number of stores there and in turn the success of those stores at the mall. If they're doing poorly, well, they close down. And the more they close, the worse the perception of the health of the prosperity of that mall. So let's use the same thing when we think about downtown Portland. It's obviously on a much larger scale than our mall example, but the theme does hold true. The more businesses that thrive there, the better. On the flip side, the more that suffer, the worse. It's not a good sign. And that brings us to downtown Portland and the latest bombshell announcement this week. REI wrote in an email to customers that its store in the Pearl District will close when its lease is up at the end of February next year. It's the only REI store in city limits, and it's been serving folks for nearly 2 decades. The company said last year, even with increased security, they dealt with the highest number of break-ins and thefts since they've opened the place. They also said they've outgrown the current space and can't reach a deal with the landlord to address the issues, so they're moving out. Now, in fairness, it's not entirely because of crime and safety due to the issues they're having with the landlord, but in their statement to customers and the media, the break-ins and theft, those were mentioned before the landlord drama, so that's certainly a huge part of the decision. We heard from a marketing professor at PSU who says the REI announcement will also be a big factor for other retail stores who are thinking about choosing downtown as their next location.
So you're really betting on the future when you invest into a new retail store. So what this is really sending a message to all of us in Portland that Portland looks not as attractive as we have in the past.
So that's not great. We also heard from a nearby business last night, which echoes a theme that we often hear from you when we talk about downtown Portland.
Whether you're very conservative or very liberal, at some point everybody just gets fed up. At some point they're going to hit a wall and they're like, we're going to have to do something, right? You know, it's going to reach a fever pitch and it's just, you got to do something about it.
Hopefully. So what is being done about it? Well, Mayor Wheeler's office sent us a statement yesterday that says his staff and Portland police leadership have met with REI officials over several months, that they've tried to collaborate to lessen the crime in and around the store. And the statement ended with this: Mayor Wheeler is committed to further supporting REI to help ensure we retain their business in Portland and help them succeed. All options are on the table as we explore paths forward. Seems a little bit late to be putting those options on the table now. And we heard from several of you yesterday fed up with city leadership and the exodus of big business.
Let's talk about REI and REI pulling the plug out of Portland. Yeah, this is a travesty. Our mayor has done nothing. His response to everything is, we've been working with them. What have you been doing? What have you been working? I mean, working is one thing, but getting results is another. I've seen nothing from him, nothing. All these businesses are folding up, leaving, moving on, and just plain going out of business. And he has done not one thing to help prevent this from happening. He's making the problem worse. So that's just my opinion. Have a good day.
Thanks, Eric. And I can feel the frustration there, and I know a lot of you share that. Kathy says, what will it take for our elected officials to take concrete action to improve downtown and bring back a vital city I moved to in 1999? We can't wait several years to see results. Something needs to change right now. And Mike chimed in. Another one bites the dust. Call attention to the impact the lack of action on the part of our city leaders is having on the downtown community. Instead of improving, things just seem to be getting worse. I expect this is not the last we will hear of businesses leaving the Pearl and Portland. Back at REI, it's worth noting that the message on the store window feels a little bit different now than its original purpose. The message says it's better out there, meaning, of course, the outdoors. Now for REI leadership, that seems to mean outside of Portland. And to hammer home this theme for you, there is a business that has decided to open a new location in Portland this month. Shake Shack already has a location in Cedar Hills area of Beaverton, but this spot along West Burnside across from Powell's Books is set to open next Monday. Burgers, fries, shakes, all of it. Pretty exciting, right? Well, someone doesn't think so. Last night, our crew noticed there's already a window boarded up at the restaurant before it's even opened. Today, police told us it happened earlier this week, and whoever broke in wasn't looking for a burger since they didn't actually go inside. They just busted the window and moved along. Well, Shake Shack, to use a play on a phrase from Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, you're not in Cedar Hills anymore. Welcome to downtown Portland. You haven't served a single burger or unlocked the door yet, and you already have plywood decorations out front. I'm sorry that happened to you. And it's not just businesses feeling the brunt of downtown's woes. The perception/reality of what goes on here is hurting a lot of organizations. Arts organizations say they're struggling to make it. We contacted several performance companies in Portland. They tell us the pandemic was one thing. It shut them down and they couldn't put on their performances. But while some have bounced back a bit, they now tell us that overall their audience numbers are declining and it's threatening their future in Portland.
The greatest threat to the Oregon Symphony today is in fact the perception that downtown is unsafe. It's the #1 reason by far of people holding back from coming to live performances.
So at that point you start to say, well, this is it going to ever surmise to the old days, so to speak, whatever that might be. It was always difficult to produce the arts, but now we're in a whole new realm of challenges and difficulties.
And we're working on a larger story for next week about the struggles facing Oregon's performing arts companies. We'd like to hear from you. Are you willing to go downtown to see a show at the Keller or a concert at the Schnitz? If not, what needs to change to make that feel okay? And how would you feel if Portland's performing arts companies had to pack up and leave downtown? Send us an email, will you? You know we like to incorporate your thoughts into our stories, and we will and we do. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail. The number is 503-226-5090. And while we're on the topic of downtown, we wanted to address another story that you may have seen floating around this week. It's about the temporary shutdown of a brand new homeless services center in downtown Portland. You might remember that county leaders originally said workers needed more training to deal with the behaviors and overdoses they were meeting with on a daily basis. Well, it turns out that was only a small part of the truth. There was apparently a lot more going on that the county decided the public didn't need to know about, until after the fact anyway. There were allegations that contract workers were having inappropriate relationships with each other, and more accusations that a contractor at the site was using drugs on the job. Throughout all of this, the county says no county employees or homeless people were involved. It all had to do with the 3 companies who were hired to run the place. Here's what we're talking about. The group Mental Health Addiction Association of Oregon operates the day center. DPI Security was, well, you guessed it, security. And Northwest Success was hired for custodial services. It started apparently the night of March 29th when a health department manager got a complaint about the inappropriate relationships and drug use. The next day, the county called the contractors to figure out what was going on and then closed the center. County crews then searched the building. No drugs or paraphernalia were found. And then finally, on April 7th, a DPI security employee admitted to using cocaine and marijuana while on the job, not in the presence of any of the homeless folks apparently, and that person was fired. The county then hired a new security company. Now, so far, the Mental Health Addiction Association of Oregon says those allegations of inappropriate relationships, they've been unfounded within their organization anyway. No word yet from the other companies. While the center was closed, the county says they made building improvements like installing more security cameras inside, upgrading a few rooms, and removing graffiti. They opened back up this week at a reduced capacity. But remember, the only thing the public was told about this was that the staff needed more training at the center. And during the closure, they did get more training, 90 hours more. But here's what the county says about why they did not alert the public to the rest of that mess going on. A statement reads, because of the nature of the allegations, the county did not disclose the details of the March 29th complaint publicly to preserve the integrity of the investigation and to ensure the allegations could be credibly reviewed.
That I understand that the public's right to know is if something truly had happened that was egregious that we were somehow not disclosing, but that is not, in fact, the case. There were broad allegations made about, mostly about relationships between people, consenting adult relationships.
And County Board Chair Jessica Vega Peterson said, closing the resource center was a difficult but necessary step to get to the heart of this complaint, resolve any issues, and set expectations for the high level of service we expect from our contractors going forward. So, here's my opinion on this. The public's right to know is the public's right to know. When the trust in public leaders is shaky at best, which it definitely is now, we need more transparency, not less. And we need straight answers. I think the county really blew it on this one. Multnomah County first said it closed the behavioral center basically to help its workers learn to protect themselves better. That seemed like a real plausible explanation. They are, after all, on the front lines dealing with all sorts of people every day. The place is busy. Roughly 170 people a day who are homeless and have issues use the center to shower and take care of other needs. Okay, fine. But then to come back 2 weeks later and say, well, the real reason for the closure was because of some of the contractors working there might have had inappropriate relations with each other. They're all adults, by the way. Oh, okay. That's bizarre. And to say that part was kept secret from the public, covered up to protect the integrity of the investigation? Are you kidding me? Give me a break. You're going to deny services to 170 needy people a day for 2 weeks because of that? And what's the result of your big investigation? One security worker getting high on the job, and so far, no inappropriate relationships, at least not from that main contractor standpoint. So now, I don't know who or what to believe. Were the workers at the center in danger and needing more training, or was there some sort of an HR mess and the county panicked and shut down everything and started spinning the public? We're living in sort of a turbulent time right now. We need public leaders to tell us the truth, not to spin us. This is an example of spin and hiding behind excuses that don't serve anyone. The result is an erosion in whatever shred of trust is left when it comes to political leaders. Just tell us the truth. That's my opinion anyway. What do you think? You don't have to agree with me, but you should communicate. You know the drill. Send an email or leave a voicemail. I look forward to hearing from you. Still to come on the story. It's Good Energy Week, and we're continuing our look at the environment by talking about one of its most important winged contributors, bees.
Really having a large supply of bee colonies is critical for all those crops.
The cautiously optimistic news about honeybees after many of their colonies collapsed more than a decade ago. And the ways you can help support one of the planet's most important pollinators when the story returns. As we continue our Good Energy Week coverage leading up to Earth Day, we wanted to turn our attention to one of the unsung heroes of our ecosystem and food supply, bees. Did you know Oregon is home to nearly 800 species of bees? I didn't. That's astounding. Very few of those are the ones you're used to seeing. Environmental reporter Cale Williams caught up with some bee experts and enthusiasts. He tells us why the narrative you've heard about bee population declines is just part of the story.
This larger one's a female, and the smaller one's a male.
That's Stephen Paisley, a retired electrician who's found a second calling, mason bees.
There's a full adult bee in each one of those.
Paisley was out at Willamette Valley Vineyards, that's south of Salem, getting their mason bee house ready for the season. As soon as the temperature gets up to 55, those eggs will hatch, and the mason bee life cycle will begin.
The female will come here and find this channel and go all the way to the back, and she goes, "This is a good channel. I can build my nest here." And then she'll fly away and get a little mud, and she'll build a little tiny wall all the way back here.
Mason bees got their names because they use mud for their nests.
They excavate a little bit here, but a lot of mud's been removed from right in this area. That goes back 4 inches or so.
Paisley has built and helps maintain dozens of mason bee boxes, and his enthusiasm is hard to miss.
I mean, every day I go out there and watch her go in, do this, and oh, come look at this. This one's almost full, and it was just, it was just entertaining.
But beyond their ability to entertain, bees play a crucial role in our food supply.
There's a lot of seed production in Oregon, and bees are integral to the production of that seed.
That's Andoni Melothopoulos, a horticulture professor at Oregon State. From alfalfa to carrots to cherries to Hermiston's famous watermelons, he said bees are essential to all kinds of different agriculture.
Really having a large supply of bee colonies is critical for all those crops.
So it was concerning when, about 15 years ago, many honeybee colonies started to collapse. But since then, honeybee numbers have rebounded.
The one thing to say with honeybee colonies in general is stocks have actually been climbing. So there was a period, 5 years ago, it was at its low point, and then the colony numbers have increased.
Now, that doesn't mean there's nothing to worry about. Beekeepers are constantly battling pests, disease, and an increasingly dry landscape caused by climate change that can make collecting nectar hard for the insects. And honeybees are easy to keep tabs on. But Oregon's nearly 800 species of wild bees, that's a different story.
For many of them, there's so little data we can't even track if there's been a decline.
Melothopoulos said that perhaps we should be less worried about whether bees are disappearing and more concerned that we don't know whether bees are disappearing. What is clear, though, is that bee habitat is shrinking. And while building a mason bee house or planting a garden full of bee-friendly flowers is a step in the right direction, Melothopoulos said that to protect the future of bees and our food supply, we need to think bigger.
The biggest thing that people can do, I think, is really try and support farmers and other land managers who are trying to put big tracts of flowering plants in the landscape. Utility companies, golf courses, forest companies, that's where we need it.
Cale joins me now. And Cale, so is your expert saying that we need to do more for the landscape to make it more bee friendly?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, he's saying that things like mason bee boxes, planting bee-friendly flowers in your yard, those things are great. They're really good for education, makes people kind of have a relationship with bees, gives you a little bit of sense of agency. But to really make a dent in the problem, which is these wild bees losing their habitat, you need something on a much bigger scale. And so these are things like golf courses and the Forest Service, where you have land managers who can make intentional choices about what they're planting so they can have these sort of bee-friendly, large-scale habitats.
Okay, so my folks in Seattle that used to foster mason bees for a friend of my brother, not really making a dent.
They're doing great. Tell them I said hello.
I'd be happy to hear that.
But also tell them that they need to advocate with the policymakers in their state to get these pollinator-friendly plants on larger scale landscapes.
Okay, and as far as the honeybees, though, great news. I want to make sure that people really caught that in your package there. They're coming back.
Yeah, so there was apparently, a big decrease in European honeybee colonies 10, 15 years ago. And these are the bees that, do all of this work in this agricultural setting, that bring the pollen, that, create all these lovely fruits that we get to eat, especially here in Oregon. But they've really bounced back. I mean, the beekeepers are still fighting with diseases and pests and some, effects of drought from climate change, but they're nowhere near as in dire straits as they were 10 years ago or so.
That's great. Of all the things we need to worry about, there's one less.
Just one.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Gail. Great stuff as always. Appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Still to come on the story, we're checking in with our friends and neighbors in the town of John Day in eastern Oregon after a devastating fire tore through a section of downtown last night. And later we'll share some of your thoughts on electric vehicles in Oregon following our story last night. Don't go anywhere. The story returns right after this.
Straight ahead at 6:30, an emotional day as the man who admitted to shooting protesters at Normandale Park is sentenced to life in prison. Hear reaction from those who survived. Also ahead, a downtown Portland restaurant hit by vandals before it even opened its doors. Plus, we'll tag along as hundreds of kids learn how to ride a bike and the rules of the road. That's next at 6:30. Hope to see you then.
A month ago, I got to spend some time in John Day reporting on Oregon's urban-rural divide. There's a lot of great people there, and tonight some of them are hurting. Here's why. Monday night, a fire broke out at the old Radio Shack building in downtown John Day. Shannon Adair took these pictures and shared them with me today. Her brew pub, the Pub 1188 Brewing, is right next door to where the fire was. It shares a common wall with the building that burned. It took fire crews 5.5 hours to get things under control, and Shannon says the flames were terrifying.
They were high. I mean, it looked like it was, we're really lucky that it didn't destroy the whole block, because those buildings are just right next to each other. In these small old towns, they just, you know, when those buildings were built, they were just wall to wall. And our building, when we remodeled that building, we found letters in the space in the ceiling from 1898. So they're old, and so yeah, it was pretty scary.
I interviewed Shannon in her brew pub last month. Now it's closed, and she's waiting to hear how bad the damage is, especially along the back wall of the pub, which is the same back wall of the building that burned.
There's a lot, you know, there could be things in behind the wall that we're just not aware of. There's a lot, it's on our kitchen. That's where our kitchen, it's on the wall where the kitchen sits. So there's a lot of electrical in that area. There's, you know, smoke can do so much damage to everything. All of the food will have to go, all the inventory, potentially all the grain.
Shannon still has a sense of humor. She joked about making a limited version beer with the smoky grain there. She also had lots of praise for the volunteer firefighters who rushed to help and keep the entire block from burning down. I asked what the rest of us can do for help, and she said, just send positive thoughts. No word yet on what may have started the fire in the first place. Up next on the story, we ran a segment last night concerning electric cars and how more and more of them are showing up on Oregon roads. You had plenty to say about it, both for and against EVs. We'll check in on your thoughts right after this. All right, let's talk about electric vehicles and get to some of your many comments after last night's story. But first, let me also make a correction. Last night I ripped the Oregon Department of Energy for not having an updated number on their EV dashboards. The numbers were from last November. Anyway, I also told you that I'd sent them an email asking for the latest numbers, but that they apparently did not care enough to even reply. Well, that was not correct. It turns out the spokesperson for the Department of Energy did indeed reply to me within an hour. Yeah, so that's quick. I missed that email. And then when I checked again at 5 o'clock, I missed it again. So I'm sorry, I was wrong. Let me state for the record, they do care enough to reply. And they told me, by the way, the latest number is 64,144 EVs registered in Oregon. I still hope they update the website. One more bit of a clarification, by the way. Last night I said the state's rebate program for people who buy EVs is out of money and on hold. Turns out the program not on hold yet. It will be suspended by May 1st, meaning if you buy or lease an eligible EV between now and April 30th, you can still apply for the state rebate. So you have about 2 weeks. If they run out of money by the time your rebate application comes in, you'll be put in a waiting list and will get your rebate once the state gets its next allotment of money for the program early next year. Now that we've got that underway, let's get to your comments. We got plenty that sounded a lot like this from Dave.
My wife and I have owned a Tesla for quite a few years now, but have about 50,000 miles on it. And a couple of things I wanted to add is that there's literally no maintenance on an electric car. We have to change the windshield wiper fluid and the tires, but that's about it. And because of the regenerative braking, the brakes are almost brand new at 50,000 miles, which also reduces the amount of brake dust in the environment. And then, like some of your guys said, it's fun to drive and fast and just really easy to take care of.
That does sound good. But we also got several emails from folks like Ann, who says they're probably great for those who can afford them. I'm on a fixed income and a new car is not in my future at the present day incentives. Though I'd like to go greener, the upfront cost keeps me out of the market. And many of you still say, no way. Mike wrote to us, "Some of us need our full-size pickups and other vehicles. Am I supposed to simply stop camping and hunting, both of which I'm extremely passionate about, but they don't have chargers in the middle of the woods? All options need to remain available." We got a lot of questions about different aspects of the electric vehicle program. We'll work to answer some of those as best we can in our future coverage. But in the meantime, that's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. And remember, the story, our story, well, that never ends. I'll see you tomorrow.